Spring Bristol was great. Let's talk about it. Hello and welcome to the first edition of something I want to try to do a little bit more just to try to work on my ability to talk about this kind of stuff and get better and get out there more. And I'm going to do a reaction to the race that just happened. This Food City 500 Spring Bristol race just finished up, and it's going to get a lot of hate and a lot of love, just like its winner. So let's start off with early in the going. I missed about the first, I want to say, 30 laps as I was preparing our dinner. I know I was making it really early. It was corned beef and cabbage. It's St. Patrick's Day. Come on. But I tuned in and we were going back green after that first yellow, which I saw was for William Byron getting up out of the groove and slamming the wall with his right rear and breaking a toe link. I think the proper cautions for debris. Byron, I think he's the first driver in the next gen era to come in, pit, and successfully replace a broken toe link, which is very interesting. We'll see how that affects the way teams and drivers attack a toe link further on down the road in this next gen car. And so we went back green after that, and Tyler Reddick got put 3 wide, got loose, and went around. He was locking it down. It looked like he was going to keep it off the wall and keep the car clean until Zane Smith, down on the apron, locked it up trying to avoid the wreck and ended up hitting Tyler Reddick in his right front. Zane Smith ended up blowing a tire later, and he was off the pace for most of the day. Tyler Reddick really never got the damage fully repaired. He was off the pace for most of the day, which is really unfortunate because I had Tyler Reddick winning this week, and obviously I was pulling for 23-11, baby. We got back going green, and it became quickly apparent that there was going to be one massive issue, and that was tires. After about just 40 laps on a set of tires, you would get a lot of tire wear and a lot of cording. There was a picture that Colleague Racing posted on their Twitter, and I'll probably put it up on screen, of their tires after about a 40 lap run, and they were completely corded. It's some of the worst cording I've seen since probably IndyCar Texas in 2017, 2018, somewhere in there. I can't remember what year it was, but probably some of the worst cording I've seen since that race, and it was really bad. So it became quickly apparent that the name of the game was going to be saving tires. And I will say, right after that, I had 2 or 3 guys that came to mind about who was going to be the best in this style of race. And I said Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr. The veterans of the sport, they've been around for a long time. They know how to tire save. They were around during that Gen 4 era when tire saving was so huge. Obviously not as huge as the 80s and 90s, but it was still a thing, unlike with the next gen era, that the tires have been just so good, and in a bad way, that they're just so stuck, there's nowhere, and it's horrible. So those were the guys that came to mind. And one of them was, I don't want to say taken out because he still was racing, but even though he was running up front, all of a sudden you'd hit that 40, 50 lap mark, and as Clint Bowyer and Kevin Harvick were saying, the cars would just shut off. You would drop like a rock through the field. You'd go from competing for the lead, and in 5 laps, you're getting lapped. And that's how it was for Kyle Busch. He ended up spinning out and causing another caution at the end of stage 2, the end of stage 1, and he would never really get back to the front. He showed pace, but between his tire issues he had all day and his pit crew issues, which just keep coming and biting him, I mean, he just was a non-factor after stage 1. Ty Gibbs won stage 1. Stage 2 went mostly green up until towards the end of the stage. You had Ricky Stenhouse Jr. make contact with Michael McDowell and get loose. He would end up going around Daniel Hemrick, and another driver who I'm forgetting right now would also get involved. And that would put out the caution with about 20 to go. They didn't pit until about 16 to go, and they didn't go green until around 10 to go, so they took their time with the yellow. They pit, and Ty Gibbs came out on a set of qualifying scuffs, and you had Joey Logano battling at the front for a stage win and a couple others, and I believe Truex and Denny were both also up there. And Ty Gibbs, on his set of scuffs, he didn't save them at all because he knew that by driving up to the front of the field, he would use up his scuffs, but he also knew that he'd still have another set of tires laying that the other guys wouldn't, and he just drove up to the front, took the second stage win, so he swept the stages. And I forgot to mention, NASCAR gave the teams an extra set. They had enough extra sets to have one for every driver, and a lot of drivers didn't exactly agree with just getting one more set because they had a feeling they need more than just the one more set. The one that comes to mind is Josh Berry said something to the effect of, "That's not going to be enough. This is going to be fun." I can't remember exactly what he said. I believe I saw Matt Weaver tweet about it. He would also say later in the race, though, that at least drivers aren't going to be being about being aero tight or aero blocking, which is true. I mean, if you have these tire saving races like this, if you have a lot of tire wear like this, you're going to have less worry about this aero blocking, aero tight type racing, and you're not going to have to worry about it as much. So therefore, it's going to be that's not going to be what everyone's talking about during the race and at the end of the day, but rather the tire wear, which I want to say one of the biggest complaints about this next gen car has been the lack of tire wear because you have a bigger tire. So keeping these same compounds isn't going to help you, and the tires were built for less horsepower, and we're 2 years in and we still haven't figured out the tire. And Goodyear brought the same tire that they brought September 2022 at the Bristol race. So they've been bringing the same tire. And if you remember correctly, that race also had tire issues, but this race didn't have as much. It was just the wear. And I think that's a lot to do with the resin. They previously put PJ1 on these tires, or on this track, and instead they brought a resin compound in which Denny Hamlin would end up saying that in qualifying that I'm not going to quote him exactly. I'll throw the tweet from Jeff Gluck about it up on the screen, but it was something to the effect of that he thought that somebody pee-peed in the Goodyear rubber that they put on the track. And I mean, it helped because the track was slick. You had these tire issues. So it was really just a saving tires type race, which I think led to some great races. You had comers and goers. You know, you have some drivers that push to get that track position, and then they get it, and then they're stuck on the top, and they can't get back down to the bottom, and their tires are now worn, and they drop to the back, and they start to save their stuff back there, and then they got to pit. Then he would lead the field back to the green flag. Ty Gibbs would lead the field back to the green flag at the start of stage number 3, but it wouldn't be but 20 laps before Martin Truex Jr. would overtake him for the lead, and this was where things would get a little dicier. As about 30 laps later, so we're about that 50 lap mark, Josh Berry would self-spin on his own, not hit anything. His car would still be clean. He'd stay on the lead lap. He'd come out like 20th off pit road, and that would bring out a yellow. Everyone pit, and Denny Hamlin would take the lead on pit road. That 11 crew has been on fire this year. Obviously at Phoenix, he had the number 1 pit stall, but you still need a fast lap, your fast pit stop to get off of pit road in time to beat everyone off. He would win the race off pit road, and we'd get another handful of laps green before we would have our next yellow, which would be the final yellow of the day, for Austin Cindric making contact with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. on the bottom of the track, both cars would spin out right in front of the leaders. This was a battle between Stenhouse, who was the first car a lap down, and Cindric, who was the last car in the lead lap. They would touch, spin out right in front of Denny Hamlin, and both go around. This would bring out the final yellow of the day. Drivers would come down pit road. I believe this was around when Larry Mack said they had either 2 or 3 sets laying in the pits. And I think everyone expected us to get another caution, including the commentators, who after we went back green with, again, Denny Hamlin leading us to the green, we would settle into a groove. It was Ty Gibbs and Denny Hamlin battling it out for the lead. We had about 80 laps I wouldn't even say that, around 100 to go. And your leaders are, again, the 54, the 11, the 20, and the 19. They would take off, and they would just basically leave the field in the dust. They were gone. It would be around 70 to go that we start to see drivers start to fall off. It would start off with your leaders, Ty Gibbs. You saw Todd Gilliland falling off, Josh Berry, Kyle Larson fell off really hard. A lot of the people on the commentators on the broadcast thought that Kyle Larson would be one of the better ones at saving tires from his dirt track background, but once it got to that mark, like they said, his car just shut off. He fell off. Blaney fell off Logano. A lot of big names just fell off. Their tires were gone, and their car just shut off. They dropped back. They went a lap down. They ended up having to pit. Everyone was waiting for that caution. Everyone thought that someone would bring out a caution, and it was almost Ryan Blaney, who, as Clint Boyer pointed out, got sideways off of turn 4 where Tyler Reddick was basically staring at his number, but he saved it. Neither of the drivers collided, and they went on their happy way, saving their tires. And as the run went on, more and more drivers pitted, and all of a sudden, there were 3 cars on the lead lap. Brad Keselowski, Denny Hamlin, and Martin Truex Jr. Except for flip those 2 around for the order from 3rd to 1st. And all of a sudden, you're looking at maybe this race goes green for the final 100 some odd laps. And sure enough, it did. And as it shapes out, Denny pits. Lap later, Martin pits. Lap later, Brad pits. And now all of a sudden, you have Berry back up to 3rd and Larson in 4th. Brad's all the way down in 6th. But those 2 were some of the first to pit. So when you're looking at it, it doesn't really show where the finishing results would be, because Berry and Larson would both drop off towards the end there and fall out of the top 10. Unfortunately, I think a couple of them went a lap down. But as that final run went on, Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. just kept creeping up that run order. Even after they got new tire or had the pit cycle, they just kept creeping up that top 10. And with about 10 to go, Martin Truex Jr. and Denny Hamlin, with Hamlin in the lead, were in heavy, heavy lap traffic with drivers in the top 10. Austin Dillon was trying to hold off Denny Hamlin to keep from going 2 laps down. And they just keep going by people who are in the top 10. And Truex would get the lead from Denny, but Denny would catch him again with him stuck behind Ross Chastain with Bubba Wallace at Chastain's outside. And Denny just basically said, hey, you're in my car, so I'm just going to move you out of the way. He moved Bubba Wallace in the corner, sent him up the track, and Truex, he would get to his back bumper a couple times, but in true Truex fashion, he never moved him, he never hurt him. It was a clean race, and Denny ran away with it as much as he could. I mean, obviously, the top 2-3 cars lapped everyone but the top 5, which the last time that happened, it's been a long time. I mean, we're talking Atlanta pre-repave and pre-next gen. So this is the first really dominant next gen era from drivers like this. And 5 years ago, I would say I hated this race. This was one of the best races I've ever seen. You could pass on a short track, which is something we haven't seen at Bristol in a long time. And I was impressed. I saw at the very beginning that, okay, this is either going to be a great race or it's going to be a crapshoot. and it was the former. You had comers and goers, you had tire saving, you didn't know what was going to happen next. It had you on the edge of your seat. It was like you were watching a super speedway race, except for they're not junking cars. They're not, you know, in a pack. You know, it felt like they were in a pack for a while in the earlier stages as they're saving tires, but you could pass, you could get around. That means the same thing, but you could pass. You had comers and goers. I mean, it was a hard fall off, but it was still comers and goers, and it was, like I said, it's one of the best races I've seen in the next gen era, and probably one of the best races I've seen in my life. I haven't. I mean, obviously I've been alive since '04. I remember races since 14, and I don't remember watching a race as good as that one in just pure racing style. You know, we're not wrecking race cars. We're not in a pack drafting. We're on a short track, and it's true tire saving short track racing, and that's what Denny Hamlin kind of did the win to. He said once that he knew it was going to be a tire saving race, he gave themselves a great shot because that's what he grew up doing. He grew up saving tires on these short tracks, and you know, the ones he said illicitly were South Boston, Myrtle Beach, Martinsville, tracks that, you know, in a late model street stock or late model stock car, you are saving tires and biding your time early in the race to not use your stuff up so that late in the race you can go and you can blow by these guys. Clint Bowyer said there was a time early in his career at Martinsville where he drove out to a several second advantage early in the race, and that same stint he was getting lapped. And it was one of those types of races. Like I said, you had Kyle Busch, who at the beginning of one of the stints early in the first stage, he was up there, he was battling for the lead, and he had the lead for a little bit, and then all of a sudden it was like bam, no tires left. Within 5 laps, he was on the verge of going a lap down. Within 10, he was spinning out because he had a flat. And honestly, if I had to give this a J-Dub Race Reviews rating, I'd give it at least a 9 out of 10, maybe a 10 out of 10. It was that good of a race. Now it's time for the final segment of what I'm going to do here. I'm going to call it the J-Dub Dub of the Race. This is the who I thought benefited. I don't even want to say benefit. Who I think had the best dub of the race, I guess. The best thing from this race, and I'd say the fans. The fans get the dub of the race because, you know, it was a fantastic race. I can't emphasize that enough. This was a fantastic race. And I think that because of that, the fans deserve the dub of the week. Honorable mention, NASCAR and Goodyear for laying down this resin on the racetrack to make it as good as it was. And with that, I want to thank you all for watching. Hope you all have a great night, and I'll see you next week for, I don't even know what sponsor it is, the Echo Park Grand Prix, I think it still is. We'll call it that, the Echo Park Grand Prix at COTA.